I want to thank you all for joining us today. This will be one of our five of the series of Unspoken Truths for February Black History Month. And joining us today is Kevin Holmes and JD Johnson. And I will give you guys just a minute apiece to introduce yourselves or reintroduce yourselves to our fan base.
What you want me to say? What kind of introduction do you want? You got to be specific. You know what I'm saying?
I
Because I
mean,
could
our
say, well, I'm Kev. Thanks for having me again, Chantée, and we keep it moving. You know.
our topic for today is unspoken truths of being Black in America, and you were on the first panel of unspoken truths, being Black in the workforce, and Jakia, you being unspoken truths of being Black in education. And so, if there's anything from that introduction or anything you
Yeah.
want the people to know.
All right. All right. Um. Well, as Chantée mentioned, I'm Kevin Holmes. I'm black. I'm usually one of the only black folks in most of the jobs that I've held. um, but in all seriousness, I would define myself as an educator, as a coach, as a businessman, as a hustler, as a podcast host, a father, a brother, a son. But all in all, I guess in all of those kind of verticals and categories, I'm just Kev, man. I'm Kev. Me and Chantée, we go back for quite some time. And I'm just happy and so excited about the podcast and the Unspoken Truth series and whatever I can do to support. This is part of my village. And being black in America, I think part of it is, we have to be a support system within the village. And so I'm happy that you invited me back. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll jump in. I'm JD. Some people know me as Jakia, that's what the J stands for, but I go by JD. And I was on the Black Educators session, and I currently work with Teach for America. I also do some DEI development outside of that. And I'm happy to be back also. I would say that the thing that I like to tell people is I am a legacy in every form that you can think of that. And I'm making sure that I'm creating the sustainability with that. So if and when I'm blessed with children in whatever capacity that may come, that they will be able to continue on what's been passed down to me. And so, yeah, that's me.
Cool. I love that. And I love that for me, um, Kevin, you mentioned the village, and Jakia, you talked about JD. Sorry, you mentioned um, legacy, and to me, I feel like I'm constantly explaining to people what Black excellence is not. And so it's not always the glitz and the glam, and it's not, the Range Rover with the rims and all those things. It's the things that we have in our communities that
Mm-hmm.
we sometimes look past as something that's being normal or something that's boring. And so I'm appreciative of you all just being examples of what Black excellence is. And so thank you for joining.
Thanks.
Appreciate that. I'm trying. I'm trying, man. That's all I can do is try.
Listen,
Mm-hmm.
all we could do is do.
Yeah.
And so 2020 was kind of crazy.
Kind of.
Kind of crazy.
That's an understatement.
Who?
2020 and being Black was aggressive. It was intense, and it came with a lot of its own challenges. And on your panels, I asked you all to talk about your experiences in your workforce arena and what that looked like. Well, we're in 2021 now. And Kevin, you started off saying, I'm tired. You said, I'm tired of telling people and educating people on my Black experience.
Mm-hmm.
That was early. That was like July.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it was just some. It was like at the peak of all of the nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So here we are, January, going into February of 2021. How you feeling?
Um, More of the same, honestly. I guess what's been interesting is that first of all, I'm blessed. I'm blessed and very, very fortunate, and I'm so grateful and appreciative that I made it to see 2021. Because a lot of friends and family members and folks that have been pillars in our communities did not. Um, and I think that the year taught me a different level of perseverance and a different level of focus, because I made a conscious decision to just work on all of the things that I could control. And they say when a soldier is in the heat of battle, they don't notice the bullets flying over their heads or past them. They don't notice the explosions going on. They don't notice the tanks that are moving, because each soldier has a job and a role. And the minute that you take your eye off of your mission, that could get you killed. And so what 2020 really taught me was that though it was all of this chaos going on around me, I said the only thing that I could control was to really be focused on the things that fill me up. My family, my passions, my profession, and that was it. And whatever that looked like, if it was systems that I needed to put in place, if it was a focus on my health, if it was a conscious decision to check in with my friends and family that maybe it had been a while, or we needed that level of community and camaraderie to get through 2020 together. Like, that's what I was focused on. Outside of the political unrest, outside of the social injustice, outside of the pandemic in itself, I couldn't control any of that. Some of the problems that we experienced in 2020, they was experiencing them same problems in the 60s, in the 20s, in the 1800s, right? And so that's something that I couldn't change. We couldn't, unfortunately, we could not save George Floyd. We could not protect George Floyd. The same way that we couldn't protect and save Trayvon Martin. The same way that we couldn't save and protect, Eric Garner. And so instead of me kind of, getting hype and rah-rah, yeah, I was upset, I was sad, I was frustrated, I was depressed, I was miserable. But I knew that I still couldn't control all of those things that were bringing me to that point mentally. And so what was going to be my outlet to make sure that I could be my best fluid self to take care of all of my other responsibilities? Because, they say, well, yeah, you only live once. Nah, you only die once. You live every day. Mm-hmm. So I was just fortunate enough to live 360, last year was last year a leap year?
Yeah.
Okay, so 366 days. I was fortunate to live through all of them joints in 2020, and now I'm here. But I think that level of fortitude and focus and perseverance, it's like, okay, well, I know I'm tough. I already knew that, but I think I was more strategic in not just being tough, but trying to figure out, okay, what is the outcome that I want? What are the things that I want to provide myself? What are the things that I want to provide my community? And so, yeah, focus, man.
Yeah. And Jakia, you about to go ahead.
Yeah, you already know I'm coming. And so I would say it's nice to hear that perspective, because I was the opposite. I told myself I was going to feel every day. And I think the reason why I wanted to feel is because I think that if we don't take the time to get the gravity of what happens, because we are taught how to create safety for ourselves to just sustain, then we run the risk of continuing to have the same cycles. And so for me, in like my arena, and I'll name that this is specific to how I was able to experience, and I don't think that everyone should do this, So it was refreshing to hear your perspective, Kevin. But like for me, I was like, no, I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna yield to whatever emotion comes, and I'm gonna face it fully, because my end goal is, as I'm thinking through the years to come, I don't ever want to be so numb in this moment that I start to recreate this cycle, or as people are recreating cycles, it's like we just allow it to happen because we've never taken the time to fully get to the depths of what's going on. And that was exhausting. I think that when we talk about building emotional resiliency, it sounds good. It's that nice, sexy language, but it's ugly work. And it takes a toll, and you have to have systems and structures in place to make sure that you don't succumb to it as you're experiencing it. And so my focus on mental health looked really different. And that was, I would say, if I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't have taken on that challenge last year. Because what I learned is when you start to lean into the emotion, you no longer get to lean into your individual emotion. You start to bring on that collective impact. And so with my work or with people who I've been around, it was just a very unsettling yet invitational like experience around, okay, this has been my perspective, this has been my pain, this has been my trauma, this has been my solution because of what I've experienced. But now that I'm understanding other folks and I'm feeling it, so I'm moving into what I call that gray space of empathy and sympathy, like that little perfect nuance. I was then able, to your point, be more strategic in how I showed up with the positional power that I have, in the ways in which I create structures that people have to abide by. And so what is my hand in perpetuating? What is my hand in truly being resistant? And so I would say the last year gave me a chance to perspective build through the lens of emotion first. And I don't think that enough people start from that perspective, because if you haven't dealt with your own trauma, and if you haven't dealt with your own emotions, it's harder to then do that for other folks. And then I would say that led me to dynamic conversations with some people, specifically people across lines of difference, because I'm coming in from a place of, I can convict you with emotion, but I'm not isolated to just my own. And that's a different type of compelling experience. So I would say being Black last year taught me how to balance how to move forward while also being present to the moment. And so I'm comfortable, but I think it was necessary.
I like the emotional resilience, because but I think that's Black folks. That's the soul of Black folks. We've always had to be emotionally resilient, but I think what has happened, like you mentioned, JD, there's no balance. There's no balance, and there's no system in place on how to optimize being emotionally resilient. And in thinking about that, I had an aha moment actually. 2020 sucked for most people that I know, right? And this is across race, this is across socioeconomic status, this is across education, this is globally. I think 2020 sucked for everybody. And I guess what was profound for me, going through the experience, and Chantée can attest to this, I pretty much had not a tough 2020, I had a tough decade. From 2010 all the way to 2020. Dealing with loss of loved ones, dealing with a divorce, dealing with, losing my path, dealing with trying to figure out who I needed to be as the 40-year-old Kevin, right? I think I was very kind of professionally driven when I was a 20-year-old Kevin. And then you hit a point where life started to pick up and things start to happen that brings your whole scope out of context. And so when 2020 came around, I think because I had felt, similar to you, JD, because I had felt and I had took the time out to really just deal with my triggers, and to deal with the things that I was uncomfortable with, and to really deal with my vulnerabilities. 2020 was just all right, well, I seen this before. It's just, it looked different previously, but I've seen it all before. And unfortunately, though, that was for me. I don't think a lot of people have had that level of understanding or that process, because 2020 for some was the first time that a lot of folks had dealt with anything serious of that nature. And I was learning that, you know, even with my within my network and a circle of friends, you know, we have these conversations like, man, this is hitting people, but some people are taking this kind of hard. Versus like, all right, well, you know, there's been racial inequality forever, so like, okay, we know we've seen this before, but there's also a reaction that we have control over. And so I think I was really just fortunate enough to, you know, really go through the guillotine before 2020, and then even starting out the year prior to the death of Kobe, prior to the pandemic, going through some significant challenges that I was questioning my sanity for real. You know, I had to call my mother one night to talk me off the ledge, because I was like, yo, if this is what life is going to be, then let the chips fall where they may. But when the real stuff started happening in 2020, I was like, all right, well, I made it through X, Y, and Z. I can make it through this. I just need to figure out, like you said, JD, how to be strategic in doing so. But I think so. Some people get bogged down in the emotional aspects, and they know that they're emotionally resilient, but they also feel that, okay, well, it's just about making it to the end, making it to the finish line. And then you don't know how to balance in between that space of pain and pleasure, you know, loss and gains, right? Because at that point you have this sense of hope. Well, if I lost and I lost and I lost in 2020, then I'm hoping for something that's better, or I'm hoping that I won't have to go through these same set of experiences. However, that ain't life, and that ain't realistic. And that was like something that I learned, like, yo, you're gonna have tough times all the time. The older you get, the more people are gonna die. The more that you become close with someone, the more that you're likely to have conflict and disagreements. You know, and so it's interesting, because I really hope that people had some of the epiphanies that we had, but I just don't know. But if people haven't had the opportunity to process and feel their way through it, I also wonder, like, what is it that we can do to ensure that we're promoting that kind of reflective behavior, that nature that we're saying, all right, it's chaos going around, but if I'm a soldier in the war, I can't get bogged down and lift my head up to see who's doing what over in the other unit, because that might cost me my life. Yeah, it's a question. Yeah, I don't know if it's an answer to it, but when you said it, I'm just like, damn, well, what are people to do?
Well, I think that, like, I would say that our world has been so dichotomous for so long that we don't understand how to look at things in tandem with one another. So I'll just say that there's multiple truths often, right? So I just told someone today, confusion is the birthing place of clarity. If you are not in a place of unknown, uncertainty, and just like loss, then you don't really understand how to get clear on anything to begin with. So if we start to shift our mindsets of how we look at things, then in my personal opinion, that's the first step into being able to help people, cliche, build their toolkit to be able to address things, right? And so when I'm thinking back to, like, your point, you've had the experiences, and I think Black people, Black culture, period, is the definition, the example, the exemplar of what it means to get proximate to pain and figure out how to turn it into something progressive. However, I also think that's one of our chokeholds, because we're so used to having to turn pain into triumph. We don't take the time to truly understand why we're in pain to begin with, which starts me back to how I started the conversation of, I need us to understand what is the thing that is allowing us to continue to grow in this way, right? And so I could get super technical and start talking about institutionalized and systemic oppression and roots and how we need to unearth, but I'll keep it like at a high level for right now, and just say, if we don't ever take the time to be okay with the confusion, just for a second, so that you can understand it and so that you can know it, you'll never get to your place of clarity. I like analogies. So I'll say also, like, you think about a newborn, they cry all the time, okay? To the average person, if it ain't your child, a cry is a cry. But to the parent, because you've been with that child and you start to realize that just saying that they're crying isn't helping you, you take a moment and you pause and you start to hear, what is the inflation in this cry? Okay, this is your hungry cry. Let me get you some food. Oh, this is your I'm sleepy cry. Let me rock you. This is your I just want to be in company. I just need to touch you. I need to have some bonding cry. But before you can get to that distinguishing factor, you had to be okay with the fact that there was chaos happening around you so that you can then make sense of it. I say 2020 was our year of like, we need chaos for right now, because if you don't have it, we would not have been able to say explicitly, this is what we mean when we say oppression. This is what we mean when we say inequity. This is what we mean when we say discrimination. So like, I was here for the chaos, and I was hopeful that we could see this as like our first step into now thinking through, how do we continue the work of our ancestors in a more explicit way?
Yeah. You're right. Because for real, I think we needed 45 for real.
Yes.
Like I think we needed 45. I think
Yes.
the country needed 45 to bring out and hold a mirror up to itself.
Hello, come on.
You know what I'm saying?
It had to be explicit.
Yeah. So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, I mean, and I think when I think about 2020, I think about what I was doing to prepare for what I thought 2020 was going to be, right? And so it's no secret that I did way too much from a professional and career development perspective in 2020. But those things were planned long before 2020 came, and especially the coaching part of it, because I knew that the way I mentored people, they needed something else, right? They needed that tool to understand that you don't have to do this on your own. You don't have to figure out how the hell am I supposed to be coping with all the stuff that's going on in life before 2020. So when 2020 came, I was like, oh, okay. Because in each of the programs I was in, I had to, JD, like you were saying, and Kevin, like you were saying, like the last decade has been a mess. It has had its points of good and bad, but the valleys were high and low. But I still had some stuff I had to deal with how I felt about diversity, the Black culture, the white culture, and all the other cultures, and how we all intertwined and come together. And because of 45, and because of the way that 2020 rolled out, I was sitting in these programs in a collective group of people that all had a similar wanting to get down to the shit of it. Like, literally, okay, you want to talk about roots? Let's talk about them.
Because to see the roots, you got to get your hands dirty.
Hello?
Right?
Yeah. And I'm so thankful for those cohorts and groups of people that I had with me moving in those pockets, because they helped me grow. And where I thought I was good in some spaces, I learned, oh, wait, that's a trigger. Now, why am I triggered about that? And it's something that didn't even have anything to really do with me, but it was an emotional connection that caused a reaction. And so being able to identify them with myself, I am better equipped to help others figure out how to compartmentalize and deal with it themselves. And so what both of you were saying was really powerful for me when I was thinking about my experience in 2020.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring up, I had a student, we were talking because she was really struggling with the loss of the life as she knew it, right? And so I was like, even just taking outside of myself for a second, thinking about a child going through this and not having the level of agency or autonomy that I have for the decisions that are being made, also just being snatched up out of your social environments and where you are and who you are. It was interesting to help her to understand that regardless of what was happening, she still had a version of control of what was happening. And when we started unpacking what she had control over, she started saying to me, but this triggers me and this does this and that does that. And then I said, so what's the trauma there? And so we started replacing the word trigger, because we also said that like, trigger is so violent. And she was like, well, I'm not trying to be the angry Black girl always and that type of stuff. And I took a step back and paused, because I was like, you're right. Like, that is a violent word. And I wonder if what would life, so this is my question to y'all, what would our experience be like if we took out the word trigger and say, I am mirroring trauma? And I wonder how like people would engage with the conversation then, and then how you yourself will, check in and diffuse any event of like being in a space where you're bothered. So thoughts there.
The term trigger, as it relates to trauma specifically, I think it's necessary. It's a necessary evil because it's a quick way to describe it. You might not have the answer to it. It might not make you feel good, but when you think of a trigger, you think of what?
Gunshot.
A gunshot, a gun, somebody being
Think of
shot.
a 9 or 45 semi-automatic.
Okay, we have gun owners on the call. That's all right. We got a gun owner on the panel. That's all right. But to all of those points and those details, when you think of trigger, you think about something associated with a gun. Something that is an experience that is a traumatic experience. And so, yeah, I would agree with the student as far as, I don't want to give the triggers power. But I think part of it is also you have to understand what's the meaning behind the word and what really sets you off. Because I'll be straight up. There are things that have gone on in my life or different environments that I've been in that I want to pull out a gun, right? I want to pull out a gun because I feel like that's what people understand, and I don't think it's the most productive approach, but I also think as Black folks, man, we try to find the best way possible to defend ourselves and protect our families and protect our communities, and sometimes we make poor decisions as a result of a trigger, just because if you don't know how to handle it or manage it, you could end up making a mistake or a decision that could impact you for the rest of your life. And so I would really say that the term is meaningful to me just because I know I've been taken there in different facets of my life. If that's, with relationships or work, dealing with folks that have different opinions that I have. And I think 2020 was like the example and the epitome of all of that. And to put those theories to practice. But you have to have an instigator to do it. Like you said before, 2020 kind of needed to happen. So you have to have a catalyst or an antagonist, right? Because a hero can't be a hero without an antagonist.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like Batman can't be Batman if the Joker and the Riddler not causing them chaos. And so the term in itself, I think, is important. But I can't tell you how we can define it so it's less intimidating or less scary.
I also wonder if she was thinking along the lines of for the folks who, when you're triggered, you don't go into rah-rah, but you shut down and you get silent and you retreat. And so then, like, I think like when she started picking apart the language, my brain went 1,000 places. Chantée, I think I saw you was getting ready to say so I'm gonna digress. But I just put it in there real quick. What about for the folks who, when you hear triggers look differently on the emotional spectrum, but we often only categorize it with like a heightened, what I call red emotion versus like a yellow-green emotion.
Yeah, and I was thinking because I kind of fall in the line with Kevin when they think about the word itself, and trigger, when you think about it from a language perspective outside of the guns and that, it still has a similar connotation.
It sounds like the N-word.
Right?
I won't go drop it because it's your show, but it's if it was my show, I probably would just. But yeah, that's what it sounds like.
You know what I mean? Like it's an instant boom, and a trigger can be, for me, in a store and someone brushes up against me and doesn't say,
well,
that is a trigger. I have an instant emotion. And then out of my mouth, I say, excuse you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a trigger for me. Like even now I'm getting hot thinking about it, right? And it hasn't happened because I'm not letting anybody get that close to me during COVID.
Lord, who done bumped this girl? Who done bumped her in the last 12 months?
She's trying to get some healing.
If you bumped her, please I hope you wore your mask and protected yourself.
Buy some Lysol, send it
from that ass whipping because you bumped her.
And I get what your student was saying around not wanting to come off as an angry Black woman. But I would offer, just because you're triggered doesn't mean that's how you have to express it in a volatile way. That is how you are feeling. Absolutely sit with it. Understand the why.
Mm-hmm. But I think like when we talk about language, right? And as people are trying to become more concise or clear with expressing themselves in a verbal way, trigger is one of those buzzwords right now that is supposed to cue that, oh, there's an emotion happening that's pretty heavy. And now we need to like try to unpack it. And what we also know to be true is anytime you have language of that sort, it starts to get weaponized. And so I'm gonna just drop age, for her to be 16 and thinking about this in this way, I was like, ooh, this is a good push, right? Because when I'm thinking back, going back to the point of us being here, being Black in America, every day that I wake up, I'm triggered. I cannot get on social media and not have something that puts me in a state. I can't come into this building right now. For example, the custodial staff, she knows I'm recording. I have a sign on the door, says recording, and she still opened that door to ask me, am I going to be here past 5 o'clock when she has my schedule? That's a trigger because I already gave you a written like, why are you talking to me? Right? So
yeah, somebody go help that custodial person because they might be in grave danger right now.
They're not in danger. No, they're not in danger. But I think when I'm thinking about the word trigger for 2020, when you are in a constant state of being triggered, but it may be, you may want to be rah-rah. Other times you may be triggered, you just need to cry. You just need to let that weakness like come out of you because it's overcoming. I think that was what started getting me to the point of, if we're going to be tight with language, maybe just using trigger as a catch-all phrase doesn't serve us well. And when you think about the past year, could that be a reason why people were so stuck? Because it's like you think you have language and you're trying to use it and it's still not actually getting to the head of what the issue is.
Yo, the was it sister? The 16-year-old was a sister?
Mm-hmm.
Well, man, she's wise beyond her years because I agree. I agree, like, yo, we got to be different. You know what I'm saying? You can't be rah-rah all the time. And because I know, like, when I've been triggered, especially like in staff meetings or something like that, with things going on, because normally I'm the only male in the room or the male of color in the room. And sometimes I just want to be silent because they expect me to come out and be Kev.
Yeah.
Or if I'm stating my case or opinion, then I'm angry. No, I'm not angry. I'm communicating what I need to verbally so that you can understand me. I'm not raising my voice. I'm not disrespecting you. I'm not even mad at you. If anything, I think you kind of funny because I didn't know how ignorant you were. But I say all that to say it's more so like, sometimes I just want to be. I want to be silent because if I say something, I'm gonna hurt your feelings. So let me just process. Yeah, let me just process and just be chill. But like you said, it's like you're constantly being triggered because as a Black man in a predominantly white organization with everything that went on last year, if people want to talk about it or have certain opinions or all lives matter, da 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 da. If I sit there as a man and I'm silent and I'm controlling my emotions because they say Black men, we don't control our emotions, then I'm wrong. If I communicate what's on my mind and I do it in a intellectually stimulating way because that's what you don't expect from me anyway, then he's Malcolm X. But then if I really turn up like Chantée has known me to turn up in the past, then I'm Tupac. So you damned if you do, damned if you don't.
But wait, to be clear for those that don't know, Kevin and I went to undergrad together. So
Chantée know my levels, man. She know my levels.
We know each other at different degrees of levels, you know.
Yo, I was 0 to 100 before the song came out.
Truly.
I was on 100. I was on 100 way before that was a term. I lived at 100 because I didn't have balance. You know what I'm saying? It was either 100 or it was 0. Now I'm just trying to.
Or you had safety, right? 100 was taught to be safety.
Yeah, because 100, I was taught that 100, people either gonna fear you or respect you. They might not love you, but they're gonna at least respect you. Or if they fear you, that's okay too. Yeah. But that's part of the trauma. When you wake up and you're going through triggers every day on a daily basis, even when you don't expect it.
But that goes back to what, JD, you were trying to avoid talking about, right? Because there's this thing called systematic trauma. And it isn't even something in generational trauma, right? So it's things that our parents and their parents have passed on to us, to which we have learned as proper behavior and language. And so we keep saying people, but I want to clarify for myself, when I'm thinking people and talking about language, I want to know how many of our non-Black counterparts, brothers and sisters, are having conversations around language the way that we are, because we have to, and there's no, I think, we have to show up, and I say we Black people of brown color, have to show up in spaces knowing how to be articulate, knowing the proper words to use so that we don't trigger the people in the room with us. Damn about our triggers, because we have to make sure that they're safe. And so it's really important for me to remember that in 2021, that I want to make sure that people have platforms and avenues and understand the resources available to them to be able to really play this game and to be able to sustain themselves in it. Because even if we have all Black banks, if we have an all Black city, who printing the money? Who is putting on the lights?
Be real risky and have real authentic conversation. Just because you all Black don't mean you share the same process or the same belief systems, and you can have the same breakdown. So this is why I say we have to understand when we use terms like white dominant culture and whiteness, that is not specific to white people. Right. It was birthed out of white people, but it is not. That's how powerful it is. It isn't that all of us perpetuates. For example, I tell people when it comes to perfection, I have a deep situation, love, hate, thing going on, where it's like, I know I want to rid myself of feeling the need to be perfect, but then I started to get into cultural spaces and I'm like, it's too much at risk if I don't show up how I know I need to show up, because I'm trying to make sure that folks behind me don't have to put out fires that I put here so that they can try to thrive, right? So when I start thinking through that, I lean into white dominant culture because I am prioritizing perfectionism. And so I was like, if we don't start to truly decode how it plays out, and if we rest in the thought that, as long as we got Black leadership or people of color, if we want to be super inclusive right now, if we just think that we have people of color in places, that does not mean that the issues will just automatically go away. Because if that's the case, we wouldn't have seen the little coons out there with the MAGA hats.
Yeah, for sure. Or Weezy getting a pardon because he endorsed 45. You know what I'm saying? So like when you talk about perfectionism and we're buying in to this culture, you could say perfectionism, you could say capitalism, because we think if we got money in our pocket, or we can go buy the latest car, the fly's house, the fly's outfit, then we think we're doing something. And I also think within our community, you have a certain population percentage of people that think that is the way to go to establish equality. I think it helps, especially if you're talking about the criminal justice system, and if I'm a black man and I get charged with a crime, if I got the money for the lawyer, then that's going to help me. But that's not necessarily going to solve the problem, though. And so yeah, but I think just because we are related doesn't mean that we're family. And I've
Hey,
also
all folk and kinfolk.
yeah, and I've seen that take place in 2020 just amongst ourselves. Well, you shouldn't vote. You shouldn't vote for Biden, or you shouldn't vote for Trump, or you shouldn't vote at all. This is not a system that we were part of anyway. So why even do it? I mean, anecdotally, you may have a point, but if people that came before you like risk their lives and did some shit that was way more traumatizing than the little bullshit you've been through over the last couple years, then you owe it to the folks that came before you to show up. You owe it to the folks that came before you to vote. You owe it to the folks that came before you to try to really embrace and embody a level of excellence. Because like you said, JD, a lot of times we only get one shot. You show up to a meeting unprepared, and you might be having a bad day. It was unintentional. You were not malicious. You had goodwill in your heart, but you might just be having a bad day and you drop the ball. Guess what? It's gonna take the grace of God for them to have the level of confidence and trust to give you another opportunity. It's the same thing in like sports. If most of the time, if a black coach gets an opportunity, NFL, NBA, MLB, whatever, it's on a shitty team, right? And so the exceptional black coaches, they got to turn a shitty team into a championship team. If they can't, then they'll hang around for a little bit. They'll get fired. But let Mike Tomlin from the Pittsburgh Steelers. You're a Steelers fan, right, Chantée?
Yes.
Okay, so let Mike Tomlin have a bad year, right? Is he the right coach? Is he the right coach for the team? He's at risk for not being here next year. And the dude's never had a losing season. The one season that it could be considered a loss, he went 8-8, and people were still questioning like his coaching capability. He got 2 Super Bowl championship rings, so it ain't winning that really gets you the respect that you need. It ain't winning. It ain't the money that you have. It ain't your level of education or sophistication. What is it then?
It's funny because you always realize things about yourself, but I realized this a while ago, but when you said it, it was something that just kind of was like, ooh. But in my industry, my 9-to-5 industry, we are coached and groomed to be a certain way. And there is no dropping the ball. There is no mistakes. And they don't care who you are. But it's even harder when you're brown of any sort. And so it's in my management style in the past, it had been really go hard and make sure that you're ready. Because Kevin, you say it all the time, I love hard. So I manage hard too. But I manage hard on women and people of color because I know that we only get a half a shot. We don't get a full shot. And a lot of times I'm the only Black person, let alone woman, in a room. And so I want to make sure that the people that are coming behind me, if I'm sick for a day, I can't come in, are going to show up just as well. Because the last thing I want to hear is that, oh, they're not ready. They're ready. They know exactly everything they need to know. You got to give them a minute to get it out of their mouth. They're not me. We all have different personalities. And so when you all were saying that, I was remembering an older version of me and how I used to operate in order to make sure that people weren't showing up fully as themselves, but showing up fully as the person I needed them to be in a space. Because there's a difference.
Yeah.
There's a difference. And so when you said that, it was just like, ooh, how have I played my part in this piece of the pie?
I think
But
if
that's your own trauma. But honestly, I really do think like our parents and grandparents, that's what they taught us because that's what they knew. They knew like, yo, if you don't, that old black tax, if you don't work twice as hard, 10 times as hard, you might not have a shot. And I'm not saying that they didn't groom us and train us and raise us to, um, experience challenges, but you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so I think part of that is relevant, but like you said, it's about how you listen and you take that approach and you make it your own, but you also understand like the level of talent and ability of the folks that you're trying to look out for. Because like you say, it's not a one size fits all approach with some folks.
Yeah. JD, you were about to say something?
Oh, go ahead, Chantée. What?
No, I was going to say you were about to say something.
Oh, yeah, I think that was the gift of 2020, right? As much as like I would love to just sit in all of the things with my less than melanated folks and their behaviors, I equally wanted to spend time thinking through what about us within our culture that we learn that we can do better at, that we can do stronger at. Because once again, I'm holding multiple truths. I could, that's a pretty aggressive. Don't do that one. I could really build bridges with folks and try to understand. And once that bridge is built, if who's crossing it are folks who are still, to your point, actively carrying the trauma without having unpacked it or done anything with it, then the question that I would pose that's like real unedited is, well, what the hell are we gonna do now that we cross this bridge, right? So as I'm not gonna say we're not begging nobody, as we're holding people accountable and as we're helping people to have an awakening, everyone likes to read that book about that little white girl who had that awakening. I need them to take listen from their folks and have an awakening today. So as you are having this awakening, we also need to make sure that we are being consistent in what we need to do so that when the waters meet, if you will, we're ready to mix and do something to move forward. And so I tell all my Black folk, because I didn't say this in the beginning, I lead a Black Women's Resource Group. And I tell them, it's like, I want you to have a place to vent. And I need you to also have a place where you're growing. And growing means you have to look inward. And if we go with the garden analogy again, it means you have to clip your own weeds so that your roots can flourish. And so I think that was the additional gift for me this year, is really looking at both truths.
So Kevin, what was your gift?
For 2020?
Yeah.
It's like iron sharpens iron, and I'm sharper. I'm sharper. I'm sharper, and I think when you can kind of work with pinpoint precision to try to be efficient and really optimize and capitalize on your strengths. Like I think that was the gift. Like, man, I'm like, damn, man, I'm dope. I'm dope as hell, man. I got to keep telling myself, because then if you come off and you kind of rest on your laurels and you talk about your accolades, yada yada yada, then people might take that a certain kind of way, right? But then I had to say, I've done a lot in my life thus far, and I'm not done yet. And so, how can I sharpen up what's in my toolkit to really just operate in a manner that puts me in the best place to be successful. So yeah, I'm sharp. I'm sharp now.
I need you to know, I went back to our little deadly analogy, and I was like, "Come on, dead shots."
She really likes guns, and she really loves them.
So that's what
You
happened.
never know when you need skills.
It's so funny. I was with Cicely Tyson passing away. One of the things that she said when someone asked her, what does she want people to remember her as or by? And she said, I did my best. And just saying it now, I'm getting like a little, because it's so simple yet so pronounced and so profound for me, because I think about my journey to today, and it's all been me trying to do my best in different aspects of my life, and hoping that just somebody would benefit from some of those things that I'm doing. And so um, I tell people all the time, I'm trying to build a legacy. And Kevin, I think you were talking about, the analogy of being in the trenches and watching the gunshots. And sometimes people are asking me, am I sitting in it and appreciating what's happening in this moment? And I have to, when I hear it, I'm like, yeah. But I really have to sit back and say, damn, like in the midst of it all, with connections and family and friends and a lot of nights of not sleeping, I've been able to create something that reminds me that I'm doing my best.
That's enough.
Yeah, and that's enough. You absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying not to go down a rabbit hole because you said so much. I'm over here like, let's unpack Superwoman complex and like what it means to humanize ourselves amongst folks where we talking about the spirit of perfection or the spirit of resiliency.
So before we end this call, I will say that the phrase unpack is one that I feel like is missing another part. So many people say, oh, let's unpack that. Then what? Because when you unpack something, you got to pack it back up.
And clean it up and put it away. Or you got to do something with it. Just can't sit there.
You got to do some work.
Yeah.
And so unpacking without putting in the work, whatever the work looks like, is nothing.
See, this is where language becomes important because I'm that person that unpack. So like literally when I get home, when I start unpacking my suitcase, what goes into the laundry goes into the laundry. What gets hung back up gets hung back up. Ain't no suitcase sit on the floor for a week and a half and then like.
Yeah, I'm the week and a half person.
That ain't me. So this is where like shared language matters, right? Because how I interpret unpack is like it's a verb for me. I am already doing something, and it's encumbersome of I'm sorting and I'm cleaning and I'm determining, I'm doing all those things. But for you, it's like in steps. This is step 1. What is step 2, 3, 4, and 5? And that's important. And I think that I wish that we would have more conversations like that so people can understand, once again, just because we got buzzwords does not mean we're all interpreting them the same way.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done.
No, I think that somebody needed to hear that, right? Because it is a buzzword along with trigger and all the other words, right? They are words that people, especially right now, like we went from diversity, equity, and inclusion being a bad phrase, language, to everything in the world has reopened back up and let's bring everyone in, let's be diverse, let's be inclusive, and not really understanding what those terms mean and not understanding the language that's carried around with it, because all three of us could have different definitions of each of those words and how we carry them through. And so that common language, I think, is really important. And for a later conversation.
Sure.
But as we come to a close, what would you all like to leave the people with from a sense of action?
I think you hit it on the head for me. And I was having this conversation with my son earlier. He was trying to negotiate a deal we had made about a gaming system that he wants. And I said, okay, well, if you get straight A's for the first semester, then, we'll get the gaming system. But you just got a gaming system last year, so, I've done my job as a father. You know what I'm saying? I've done my job. But what has come out of this deal that we made, and he said, well, Dad, I didn't get all straight A's. I got 1 B. I said, okay, well that's good. You didn't complete the task. You didn't finish the job. And he understood that, but he said, you know what? I worked really hard and I tried, and I did the best that I could.
Mm.
However, I know where I could have been better.
Mm.
And that was the moment for me, because it's like he knows that he could have done better, and now he knows what to do going forward on how to do better. But it all started with he had to put in the work. And what I would want folks to take away for 2021 is like, yo, you just can't hope, dream, and wish some shit to happen for yourself in your life, man. Like if we want the country to change, we can't sit back and say, all right, well, we voted the first woman vice president, the first black woman vice president, the oldest president. We voted them into office. Now all of our problems are gonna be solved. Because I'll be straight up with you and frank. Yo, black people had that kind of thought when Obama was in office. We got a black president now. He gonna speak to the culture. Obama gonna be for the culture. No, he's gonna have some representation of the culture in the White House, because that's what's hip. But as far as actually doing the work to make sure that we taking care of our own and we are building infrastructure within the village to be prosperous and to be successful, that's going to take us getting our hands dirty. That's going to take us getting our knees bruised. That's going to take us getting slapped around a little bit, just because it's hard work. Mm-hmm. It's hard work. And it ain't there's no way around hard work. You know, progress is hard. And I think a lot of times we think that things are just supposed to happen instantly. You know, slavery started in 1619, right? You know, black folks were recognized as citizens the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s. Then there was still Jim Crow, and then there was still the Civil Rights Movement. And then there was still, equity pay for women. Then there was still, blacks trying to take advantage in the tech space, and blacks figuring out how to start their own companies and businesses. All of it was progress. And what I need people to really understand is sometimes it's not about you shining, and sometimes it's not about you being Michael Jackson. Right? You out of the Jackson 5. It ain't about you being Michael Jackson. Sometimes you got to be the stepping stone for the next person who might be in a better place to be the star, or might be in a better place to be the leader, because we're standing on the shoulders of people that came before us and they put in the work. So our responsibility is to put in the work. We might not get the result, but we still got to put in the work because other people coming behind us. And I need people to understand it, because I think, in this social media era, it's all about the flex. It's all about the flex. It's all about what's hot, what's popping, who doing this, who doing that. And me personally, I ain't never been a brother to count nobody pockets. Count nobody pockets. I ain't never been a brother to say, yo, well, oh man, they doing this, so I want to do that. I'm not Mr. Me Too. I like to stand in my own lane and do the work. But my work looks different, because I have a different perspective. But either or, you have to put in the work. And I don't want people to think because we have a new administration, or because people are putting themselves in a position to be more educated, make more bread, do more cool stuff. The stuff, like you said, Chantée, the cool stuff that people kind of set forth as their goal. Like, that should not be the goal. The goal is to figure out how to do the work, and to do the work so it benefits us collectively.
Well, I guess you were in my brain, because I started off with, the first thing that I thought of was, I want people to self-identify. I often say that folks are in 3 categories. You're either numb, in a space of suggestions, or problem solving and like actions. And so first identify where you are. That will then allow you to determine where your contribution is best served. And I use that language in particular because I have this really great, DEI session, hit me up if you want to talk about it, where I use lip syncs as an example. And you go through a simulation, and ultimately what you start to see is when you lip sync is not successful just because of LL and Chrissy Teigen, and then the people who are singing. It's successful because you have a light and sound crew, you have backup dancers, you have makeup artists, you have seamstress, you have graphic design. Like you have a whole army of folks who are often behind the scenes. And so as you were going through like the history, all I could think about was when you were talking about that ladder, we like to think that the ladder is built out of wood. And in reality, we're talking about a ladder that was built out of people. We had people who stood and connected their arms so that other folks could step up. And so I would say, in order for us to get back to that place, first self-identify, where are you? And know that wherever you are is fine. What if you're in a numb place? Cool. Figure out why you're numb and then determine how to best serve folks with that energy, right? Because sometimes you need people who are apathetic and unruly to help to remind us of what this all we got to get you out. And we can't keep having people in this space. You need folks who are just brainstormers and ideators, who are not necessarily the executionists, because they're able to go into the clouds and think about all of the high level stuff. And then you need your action people who are in the details and willing to like put the work forward. No role is bigger or less than the other. They're all dependent on one another. So I would say that would be my call to action. Know who you are, know where you stand, and become comfortable with what your contribution should be and will be, because it's necessary.
Mm.
That was dope.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And it's just a great compilation of the three things that I have been living by. And my podcast is based off of it. Unspoken truths, before I even realized the words put around it, were based off of this. And that's awareness,
Mm.
acceptance, and authenticity,
Well,
right?
look at the divinity.
Yes, and the three A's, and awareness is self awareness, it's outside of self awareness, and along that with acceptance. You got to accept yourself before you can start accepting some of the things that you're seeing that you're being triggered by, or trauma has laid itself on you. Before you can start peeling back that onion and being comfortable with saying, I'm dope, I'm cool as shit, I am who I am, right? But in order to be who you are and really to make the change and impact that we would like people to make, they got to sit with those truths. They got to sit with those truths. And people, I wrote this in my book, and it's not a plug. This is like legit. But people think that you have to make this big splash in order to make these
Mm,
rippling effects, and you don't. You can
mm,
make the littlest little boom and it still has a rippling effect. It's going to hit someone. And I just hope that people hear that out of what you two have shared and what you've said about change and acceptance of yourself and of others, and how navigate and move us toward action. So I'm thankful. Thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate you. Appreciate you having me for sure.
Yeah, this is dope.